yeah, for sure. I'm grateful, and indirectly, it's responsible for my career.
Yeah. You'd like to do this as a series if it takes off?
Oh, sure, I'd love it. I think it'd be wonderful.
Hey, what if I told you that Wonder Woman herself, the most wholesome, patriotic superhero on American television, once posed topless for one of the most brutal war movies ever made? And what if I told you that almost nobody knew about it for decades? Sounds impossible, right? Sounds like the kind of rumor that gets passed around the internet without any real proof. But here's the thing, it actually happened. There is a photograph sitting in private collections and showing up at auction houses that proves it. A real, professional, fully produced topless centerfold of Lynda Carter, the woman who spent 3 years teaching little kids across America that women could be strong, brave, and powerful. And the wildest part of this whole story, she never even made it into the finished movie. So how in the world did Wonder Woman end up posing nude for Apocalypse Now, only to completely vanish from the film before a single camera rolled on her actual scenes? Grab a seat, because this story involves a massive typhoon, a last-minute phone call, and one decision that literally changed the history of television forever. Let's start at the very beginning, because to really understand how all of this happened, you need to understand who Lynda Carter was before she was Wonder Woman. And the honest answer is, she was nobody. Not in a mean way, but just in the regular everyday sense that she was a young woman from Phoenix, Arizona, trying to figure out how to pay her rent. She was born Lynda Jean Cordova Carter on July 24, 1951. Her dad had English and Irish roots. Her mom's family came from Mexico. They were a working-class family, no connections to Hollywood, no rich relatives who could open doors for her. Just a regular household in the Arizona heat, and a girl who happened to have a voice that made people stop whatever they were doing and listen. By the time she was 15 years old, Lynda Carter was already singing at a local pizza parlor, not because she was chasing fame, because she needed the money. After high school, she put together a band and started touring nationally as a lounge singer. She traveled from city to city, performing night after night, doing whatever it took to keep the lights on. It was hard work, exhausting work, the kind of work that most people who dream about show business never actually do. She wasn't waiting around for her big break. She was out there grinding for it every single day. Eventually, she shifted gears and started entering beauty pageants. She won Miss Arizona, and then she won Miss World USA. At the International Miss World competition in 1972, she placed in the top 15 out of contestants from all over the globe. Not bad at all for a girl from Phoenix who never set out to be a beauty queen. Those pageant wins cracked open the door to acting, and Carter walked through it as fast as she could. She packed up and moved to New York City to study her craft. She took classes with serious, respected acting teachers, people like Stella Adler, whose students included some of the biggest names in Hollywood history. Carter wasn't messing around. She wanted to be a real actress, not just a pretty face. She started landing small guest roles on television shows, a little part here, a brief appearance there, shows like Starsky and Hutch and the few others that most people have completely forgotten about. In 1975, she appeared in a low-budget Western called Bobby Joe and the Outlaw. Nobody cared about it. It came and went without making any noise. And by early 1976, Lynda Carter was broke, completely and totally broke. She later said that when her life finally turned around, she had exactly $25 left in her bank account. $25. She was days away from giving up on acting entirely and moving back home to Arizona. All those years of working, studying, touring, auditioning, and she was right on the edge of walking away from all of it. But right at that exact moment, 2 opportunities showed up at almost the same time, and the collision between those 2 opportunities is the whole reason we're talking about her today. The first opportunity was Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola, the genius director behind The Godfather, one of the most celebrated films in history, was putting together an epic war movie set during the Vietnam War. The movie would be filmed in the Philippines, and it had a massive budget and an even bigger vision. Coppola needed actresses to play Playboy playmates who would perform at a wild USO show for soldiers deep in the jungle. These weren't big speaking roles, they were smaller parts, but this was a Francis Ford Coppola film. That meant prestige, that meant being connected to something serious and important. And most importantly for Lynda Carter at that moment in her life, that meant a paycheck. She auditioned for the role of Miss May, one of the 3 playmates who would perform at the USO show, and she got it. The role had no real dialogue in the original script. She would dance, she would appear in the chaos of the show, and she would be part of one of the most anticipated movies of the decade. Carter packed her bags and flew to the Philippines to join what would later be described as one of the most troubled, most chaotic, most absolutely insane film productions in the entire history of Hollywood. When she arrived on set, she walked into something that was already starting to unravel at the edges. Coppola had built a massive stage for the USO show sequence. It was enormous, big enough to hold hundreds of extras playing soldiers, surrounded by lights and cameras, and the kind of scale that made everything feel more important than anything Carter had ever been part of before. But her very first job on that production wasn't to act or dance, it was to pose for a centerfold. Here's why that mattered. In the story of the film, the Playmate centerfold wasn't just something pretty to look at, it was an actual plot point. Soldiers at the USO show would buy the centerfolds. Later in the movie, one of the main characters, a guy named Chef, would pin Miss May's centerfold to the wall of their patrol boat. The camera would come in close and linger on it, close enough that audiences needed to be able to recognize the face in the photograph as the same woman they'd seen dancing at the USO show earlier. Coppola was obsessive about details like this. Everything had to be real. Everything had to feel authentic. So they needed an actual centerfold, produced with the same professionalism as the real thing. They hired top people to design the costume Carter would wear. A costume designer named Dean Tavoularis was brought in, and his brother Alex Tavoularis created incredibly detailed drawings of the outfit. They settled on an American Indian-themed costume. Feathers, fringe, beadwork, all of it. The sketches were done from multiple angles with handwritten notes on the margins, showing every piece down to the moccasins. It was extremely detailed work for what was essentially a prop. Then Carter posed for the photographs. Professional lighting, careful positioning. The final image showed her topless, wearing only the bottom portion of that costume, her expression calm and confident. And when they were done, the production team formatted the image exactly like a real Playboy centerfold. Same layout, same style, and they even printed fake party jokes on the back of it, just like real issues of the magazine had. If you looked at it without knowing the backstory, you would never guess it wasn't a genuine Playboy spread. It looked perfect. Carter looked perfect. Everything was ready. And then the typhoon hit. In late May of 1976, a massive storm called Typhoon Olga came crashing into the Philippines. It was a monster, one of the worst storms to hit the region in years, and the very first thing it obliterated, tore completely apart like it was made of paper, was Coppola's enormous USO show set. The structure that had taken weeks to build, that had cost enormous amounts of money, was gone in hours. Wind and rain just ripped it to pieces. The whole production came to a grinding halt. Coppola later admitted with a bit of dark humor that the typhoon was actually a blessing in disguise, because before the storm destroyed the set, he had already discovered a serious problem with it. The set had been built inland, away from the water, but during the actual Vietnam War, USO shows of that scale happened near water because troops arrived by boat. The set was in completely the wrong location. When Coppola realized this and told his crew he wanted it torn down and rebuilt near the shore, they refused. They said it was too expensive and too ridiculous. Coppola had no choice but to accept it and figure out how to hide the mistake with camera angles. But then the typhoon made the decision for everyone and destroyed the set anyway, so when production resumed, he could rebuild it correctly, right where it should have been all along. But before any of that rebuilding could happen, production was shut down for months. Cast members were sent home. There was no timeline for when shooting would start again, because nobody actually knew when Apocalypse Now would be back up and running. That's when the second phone call came, the one that changed everything. While Carter was waiting around for Apocalypse Now to figure itself out, something completely different was happening over at ABC, the television network. They were desperate. They had been trying to make a Wonder Woman TV show work, and their first attempt had been an embarrassing failure. Back in 1974, they had made a pilot with an actress named Kathy Lee Crosby playing the character, and it was bad. Really bad. Crosby's version of Wonder Woman wore a pantsuit instead of the iconic costume. She fought more like a spy than a superhero. The whole thing felt like a generic action show that just happened to borrow the Wonder Woman name. Critics hated it, audiences ignored it, and the network knew they had to try again and get it right this time. So they started fresh. A producer named Douglas Kramer began holding auditions. Hundreds of actresses came in from all over Los Angeles, each one hoping to be the woman who got to carry that golden lasso and wear those star-spangled boots. The pressure was enormous because Wonder Woman had been around since the 1940s. She was created by a psychologist named William Moulton Marston as a symbol of female strength during World War II. Getting the casting wrong a second time would basically kill any hope of the character working on television ever again. But when Lynda Carter walked into that audition room, something clicked. She had the height, 5 feet 9 inches tall, which helped her look physically powerful. She had the dark hair and striking features that matched the comic book illustrations perfectly. She had a physical presence that filled the room without her even trying. She looked like Wonder Woman before she said a single word. One producer apparently warned her that other women were going to be jealous of how she looked. Carter just smiled and said, "Not a chance." The timing for this new Wonder Woman show was honestly kind of magical because the world was changing fast in 1975 and 1976. The United Nations had declared 1975 the International Women's Year. The Equal Rights Amendment was gaining momentum across the country. The women's liberation movement was louder and stronger than it had ever been. And America was getting ready to celebrate its 200th birthday in 1976, which meant the whole country was in a patriotic mood. A show about a strong, beautiful, brave American woman who could go toe-to-toe with anyone, including men, felt exactly right for that exact moment in history. The new Wonder Woman pilot aired on ABC on November 7, 1975, and the numbers were stunning. The show pulled in 48% of the audience share that night. Almost half of every American watching television chose Wonder Woman. The network was impressed, but not entirely convinced yet. They had another female-led action show called The Bionic Woman scheduled for the following fall, and they weren't sure they needed 2 of them at the same time. So they ordered 2 more episodes to air in the spring of 1976 as a test. Both of those episodes performed just as well as the pilot. The fan mail was pouring in, critics were praising Carter's performance, the momentum was undeniable. ABC finally made the call. They wanted a full series, starting in the fall of 1976, and they wanted Lynda Carter locked into an exclusive contract immediately. And now Carter had a real problem on her hands, the most complicated, most important choice she had ever faced in her career. On one side of the scale, she had Apocalypse Now, a Francis Ford Coppola film, the kind of project that made other directors and actors take you seriously, the kind of movie that got nominated for awards and got written about in serious film magazines. It was prestigious in a way that network television almost never was. On the other side of the scale, she had Wonder Woman, a steady job, a starring role, not a bit part, not a small appearance, but the actual lead of her own television show. A character that millions of people already knew and loved. Real money when she had $25 in her bank account. The difference between having a career and giving up on acting and driving back to Arizona. But there was a practical problem that made the choice even harder. Wonder Woman needed her immediately, full-time, no exceptions. Apocalypse Now was still completely shut down because of the typhoon, with no clear date for when filming would start back up again. The movie's schedule had already fallen completely apart. What was originally supposed to be a 5-month shoot had become something with no end in sight. If Carter committed to Wonder Woman, she physically could not fly back to the Philippines when Apocalypse Now eventually got itself together. She would have to walk away from the movie entirely. No going back. She chose Wonder Woman. She made the call that seemed like it might be walking away from artistic credibility to go do something commercial. She told Francis Ford Coppola, one of the greatest directors who had ever lived, that she was quitting his movie to go play a superhero in a TV show. You can imagine how that conversation might have felt, like professional suicide, like choosing safety over seriousness. But she did it anyway, because she had $25 in the bank and a career that was 1 bad month away from being over. What happened next on the Apocalypse Now set might actually surprise you. Coppola needed to replace Carter quickly, and he needed someone who could also redo the centerfold so that the photos used in the film would match the actress audiences would see performing at the USO show. He chose a young actress named Colleen Camp. She was 23 years old, blonde, and not widely known at the time. She flew to the Philippines in late 1976, and on December 3rd of that year, she filmed the big USO scene sequence. Then she recreated the Playboy centerfold, posing in nearly the same position Lynda Carter had used, wearing a very similar costume, with the composition matched as closely as possible so everything would look consistent in the finished film. The new centerfold was shot by a famous Playboy photographer named Mario Casilli, and it looked so professional and real that Playboy magazine actually published it in their October 1979 issue after the film came out. So what started as a movie prop ended up becoming an actual magazine feature. Colleen Camp appeared in that issue alongside two actual Playboy playmates, Cynthia Wood, who had been Playmate of the Year in 1974, and Lynda Beatty, who had been a Playmate in 1976. The movie prop had become real. But here's the part that makes this whole story so wild, the detail that film historians and prop collectors eventually uncovered and started talking about. When Apocalypse Now finally came out in August 1979, after 3 years of chaos, delays, near-death experiences on set, and Marlon Brando showing up overweight and barely remembering his lines, some very careful viewers noticed something strange. In a few shots of the patrol boat that appears throughout the movie, the centerfold pinned to the wall didn't quite look like Colleen Camp. It looked similar, but something was slightly off, like maybe, just maybe, it was somebody else. And those viewers were right. Before Lynda Carter left the production, Coppola had already shot some scenes involving the patrol boat. Those scenes included shots where the camera caught the centerfold taped up in the boat's wheelhouse. And in those specific shots, the centerfold you can see is the original one, the one featuring Lynda Carter, not Colleen Camp. When the film was edited and put together, some of that early footage made it into the final cut. Nobody caught it, or if they did, nobody felt like reshooting those brief moments. So Lynda Carter ended up in Apocalypse Now after all, not as a living, breathing actress with scenes and a costume, but as a ghost image, a photograph on a wall, a face you can glimpse for a second or two if you're really paying attention and you know what you're looking for. In the original theatrical version of Apocalypse Now, which runs about 2 hours and 27 minutes, Colleen Camp's appearance as Miss May was already pretty small. You see her dancing wildly during the USO show, you see the soldiers going increasingly out of control, and then the playmates are rushed off the stage before things turn truly violent. That's essentially it. Camp had no dialogue, just presence. Then, in 2001, Coppola released a longer version called Apocalypse Now Redux, which restored nearly 50 minutes of footage that had been cut from the original. In this expanded version, Miss May got a much bigger role. There was a whole new scene where the soldiers on the patrol boat actually encounter the playmates again later in their journey, after a helicopter has run out of fuel and everyone is stranded in the middle of nowhere. In this scene, the playmates trade their Playboy centerfolds in exchange for fuel, a desperate, sad transaction that shows how completely the war has broken down any sense of normal human dignity for everyone involved. Colleen Camp finally got real dialogue, real scenes, a chance to show some actual character. But even in this longer, expanded version, every scene where Miss May appears as a real human being features Colleen Camp. It's only in those fleeting glimpses of the centerfold photograph that Lynda Carter exists in the film at all. A ghost, a footnote, a path not taken, preserved accidentally in a few seconds of film. Now, let's talk about what actually happened as a result of Carter's decision, because the contrast between the two paths is almost too perfect to believe. Wonder Woman premiered on ABC in April of 1976 and immediately became something bigger than a television show. It became a cultural moment. Set during World War II, combining superhero action with patriotic nostalgia, it arrived at exactly the right time in American history. Carter poured everything she had into the role. She did most of her own stunts, which made the network's insurance people extremely nervous. She maintained a rigorous diet and workout routine to stay in what she needed to look like to be convincing as the world's most powerful woman. She understood that she wasn't just playing a character, she was bringing an icon to life, and she took that responsibility seriously. The show wasn't just popular, it was a phenomenon. Carter became someone that little girls across America looked up to as an example of female strength and power.
And she was honest about the complicated feelings that came with playing a character who was simultaneously a feminist symbol and someone who was regularly looked at as a sex object. In 1978, she told reporters that she never imagined pictures of her body would end up tacked to the walls of men's bathrooms, and she described how uncomfortable it made her feel when men wrote to tell her exactly what they were thinking when they watched the show. But she also defended Wonder Woman fiercely. She said the character was a real champion for women, stronger than any man, faster than any man, able to fly an invisible plane, able to force anyone to tell the truth. The show walked a complicated line, and Carter walked it better than anyone else could have. Wonder Woman ran for 3 seasons and 60 episodes. It started on ABC and then moved to CBS, where the setting shifted from World War II to the modern 1970s, and the title became The New Adventures of Wonder Woman. Throughout all of it, Carter was the heart of the whole thing. In 1978, she was voted the most beautiful woman in the world by 2 separate international organizations. She signed a major modeling contract with Maybelline Cosmetics in 1977. She released a promotional poster that became one of the best-selling celebrity posters of the entire decade. She became a genuine, unmistakable star, the kind that people recognize instantly 45 years later in any country in the world. And the music never left her either. During and after the Wonder Woman years, she pursued singing seriously. She recorded an album called Portrait. She performed 2 of her own original songs in an episode of Wonder Woman titled Amazon Hot Wax. She appeared as a musical guest on television specials. She was even the first woman ever to provide a voiceover for a movie trailer, doing it for a 1975 film called The Drowning Pool. Her career kept going and going in ways that never would have been possible if she had stayed on Apocalypse Now. She showed up in the modern Wonder Woman movie franchise, making a cameo in Wonder Woman 1984 as a legendary Amazon warrior named Asteria, essentially passing the symbol of the character from herself to Gal Gadot's generation, acknowledging the legacy she created. She voiced a character in the hugely popular video game Fallout 4. She played President Olivia Marsden on the television show Supergirl from 2016 to 2018. The legacy built a life that kept growing long after the original show ended. Now, compare that to what happened with Apocalypse Now. The movie was finally released in August 1979, after 3 full years of production disasters. Harvey Keitel was fired as the lead actor after only 2 weeks because Coppola decided he was wrong for the part. His replacement, Martin Sheen, had a heart attack during filming in 1977, though Sheen told people it was heat stroke because he didn't want investors pulling their money out of the film. Marlon Brando showed up massively overweight and apparently hadn't even read the book the movie was based on. The original $12 million budget ballooned to over $30 million. Coppola shot so much footage, over 1 million feet of film compared to the roughly 11,000 feet a normal 2-hour movie uses, that editing the thing took years by itself. At the famous Cannes Film Festival in 1979, Coppola famously described the experience by saying they were in the jungle, there were too many of them, they had access to too much money, too much equipment, and little by little they went insane. The film was brilliant, genuinely brilliant. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, the highest honor that film festival gives out. It was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won 2 of them. Roger Ebert, the most respected film critic in America, gave it 4 stars and said it was one of the greatest films ever made. Film scholars still talk about it in hushed, reverent tones as one of the best war movies in cinema history. It is, without any question, a great film. But for Colleen Mahamp, who actually played Miss May in the final cut, it didn't make her famous. Not really. She went on to have a solid working career. She appeared in movies like Clue and Valley Girl and a couple of the Police Academy films. She accumulated over 100 film and television credits across her career. She worked steadily for decades. But most people today have no idea she was even in Apocalypse Now, because her scenes were so small in the theatrical version and the role didn't give her anything to really build on. She was a face in the chaos of a remarkable film, but she wasn't the center of anything. And that is almost certainly exactly what would have happened to Lynda Carter if she had stayed. Miss May had no dialogue in the original cut. She danced, she was rushed off the stage, and that was it. Nobody remembers the actress who played a playmate in a single scene, no matter how legendary the movie is. The typhoon, the delay, the chaos, all of it would have kept Carter trapped in uncertainty for months while the window for Wonder Woman slowly closed. And if she had somehow managed to complete her Apocalypse Now scenes and the timing had worked out differently, she might have ended up with a brief moment in one of cinema's greatest achievements and nothing else to show for it. Instead, she has Wonder Woman, 60 episodes, 3 seasons, an icon that defines her 6 decades later, a role that made her the most recognized female superhero in American television history. All of it because a typhoon on the other side of the world destroyed a film set and bought her just enough time for a phone call from ABC. The centerfold still exists. It shows up at auction houses now, selling for prices that reflect just how unusual and unexpected it is. The detailed costume sketches created by Alex Tavelaris surface occasionally too, showing every feather and bead of that American Indian-themed outfit designed specifically for Lynda Carter's brief role in a movie she never finished. And if you watch Apocalypse Now carefully, really carefully, paying close attention to those shots of the patrol boat, you can see her there in the background. Not as an actress, not as Wonder Woman, just a photograph on a wall, a ghost from a different version of history that almost happened. There's something genuinely moving about that when you think about it. Lynda Carter was standing at the edge of obscurity with $25 in her bank account, and 2 opportunities arrived at once, and she had to choose between the prestigious one and the practical one. She chose the practical one. She chose survival. She chose the steady job and starring role over the artistic prestige of a war film with a legendary director. And that choice, the one that probably felt uncomfortable and risky and maybe even a little embarrassing at the time, the one that meant calling up Francis Ford Coppola and saying she was quitting, turned out to be the best decision she ever made. Sometimes the choice that looks less impressive from the outside is the one that builds something real. Sometimes walking away from prestige leads to something that lasts much longer. And sometimes a typhoon on the other side of the world quietly redirects the course of someone's life in ways that won't become obvious until decades have passed. Lynda Carter posed topless for one of the greatest war films ever made. She did that. The photograph is real, the story is true, and if you look in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment in the film, you can see her there, preserved by accident in footage from a production that barely held itself together long enough to become a masterpiece. But she never appeared in the movie as herself. She walked away before the cameras rolled on her scenes. She became Wonder Woman instead, and the world is better for it. So, what do you think about all of this? Does it change how you see Lynda Carter? Does it make you want to watch Apocalypse Now with fresh eyes, paying attention to those brief shots of the patrol boat? Are you amazed at how a typhoon halfway around the world ended up shaping American television history? I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. This is exactly the kind of story that gets better the more people talk about it, and I know you've got something to say. If this video gave you something you didn't know before, please do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It takes about half a second, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love stories exactly like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you even doing? Hit subscribe and turn on the notifications so you never miss another story this wild. We dig into the hidden corners of entertainment history all the time, finding the moments that got lost, the decisions that changed everything, the photographs that shouldn't exist but do. This is the kind of content that reminds you how strange and surprising real life actually is. Share this video with someone who loves classic Hollywood, or someone who grew up watching Wonder Woman, or honestly anyone who appreciates a story that sounds made up but is completely, wildly true. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.